Hello, I'm Bruce DuPoit. Coming up today on News Talk, it's crunch time for Congress. Looming deadlines to keep the government funded and to raise the debt ceiling, and crumbling roads and bridges across America in desperate need of repair. And we still don't know who is going to serve as Speaker when John Boehner departs D.C. Washington Post reporter Mike DeBonis with the latest on all of this. Also, keeping tabs on drones. The devices offer all kinds of opportunities, but governments are struggling to keep up with this emerging technology. We'll talk with an industry insider, and we'll take your calls.
From News Channel 8, this is News Talk with Bruce DuPoit.
Welcome in on this Tuesday. We've got a great lineup for you this time, and so we are so glad that you are there. When lawmakers return to Washington, they will have their hands full. The Republicans who control the U.S. House must figure out who should serve as Speaker to replace the departing John Boehner. Members of both chambers must reach agreement with one another and with the White House on a host of important measures, not least of which a deal to raise the debt cap. And in 2 days' time, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton goes before a House panel, a committee that's investigating the deadly raid on the U.S. consulate in Libya. Like we said, a busy time. Washington Post reporter Mike DeBonis, a busy man. He covers the Hill. He joins us now with more on all of this. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Bruce.
Do the people that you interact with, the members and their staff, have a sense that as we get toward the end of what's been largely an unproductive year, that the plate is full and that there is pressure on lawmakers to act?
Yeah, absolutely. There's also just a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Nobody knows exactly how all of this is going to play out. Everyone knows what the deadlines are. Everyone knows that we don't know who's going to be leading the House Republicans at the end of the month, quite frankly, within a matter of weeks. And all of that just is combining to create this sense of I don't want to say dread, but certainly unease and anxiety about how some very important issues, not least of which is the debt limit and a potential government default, are going to get resolved.
What's the more palpable uncertainty? Is it the departure of John Boehner, who's one of the most powerful figures in the country and therefore in the world? Number two, the House Speaker is number two in the line of presidential succession. He clearly wants to go. He clearly wants his time here to be productive, and he's indicated some flexibility in terms of exactly when he heads back to Ohio. But is it the sense that the majority Republicans, that the GOP conference has yet to decide on a leader, or is it the upcoming fights on the debt cap and government funding past December and some of the other issues that cry out for action?
I think it depends on who you ask, but certainly I think right now, some of the more serious members are really concerned about the debt cap situation, especially because the leadership situation is unsettled. At some point, there will be a new speaker. We know that. It may not be, John Boehner may be put in a situation where he stays on past October 30th, which is when he had expected to leave. But, that's going to get taken care of one way or the other. The question about the debt cap is a lot more complicated because the internal dynamics are such that plenty of people can see a situation where the government could be pushed to the brink of default and perhaps over the brink, and that's a situation we have been in before, and people have seen how close we've come, and the dynamics that led to that point have only gotten more pronounced. So now I think that the sense that sort of brinksmanship is going to be taken even further than it has in the past is very real.
There's real fear about how markets would react and what the impact on the economy would be if a deal is not reached in a timely manner.
That's right. And we expect this week for John Boehner and other Republicans on the Hill to at least give some signals of how they intend to proceed. Tonight, the House Republicans will be coming back to Washington. They're going to be meeting privately for a meeting that is to, quote, discuss the October agenda. And really what that means is how do we get through the deadlines, the debt cap being the most serious of them.
In terms of some of the mechanics of the House, and this may sound a little bit at first blush like insider baseball, but I think it is important in terms of whether we get some wins, whether we put some victories in the victory column as a nation. I think it was the Hastert rule that said that legislation only advances if a majority of the majority sign on. That is to say that leadership would frown on and perhaps even block a bill from moving forward if it had relatively few, in this case GOP votes, but a lot of Democratic votes, at the end of the day enough to get it over, but not this majority of the majority. With John Boehner in arguably a different place right now in terms of where he's at mentally, are we seeing, is the Hastert rule less a thing?
Well, that depends. I think John Boehner is not out of the woods, so to speak. He has announced his intention to depart. There is some rumbling that if he were to move forward with some of these things that would pass with a majority of Democratic, pass largely with Democratic support, like a clean debt limit increase, extended government funding, et cetera, that would invite some of the hardline conservatives who have basically forced him out of the speaker's chair to move immediately to remove him. And that's something that is still being sort of bandied about as a cudgel to keep these sorts of things from happening. No one is saying that out loud too loudly, but it's definitely something that's been under consideration, that's being discussed. So he still has to tread very carefully. And that's, I think what we're going to see for the rest of the week is that, how do we start seeing the chess pieces get placed on the board so we see how this game ends.
The last time lawmakers kicked the can down the road on government funding, they didn't kick it very far. What's your expectation for how big the battle is when we revisit that issue in December?
A lot depends on the leadership situation, because the reason that we came to the brink on that was that John Boehner was in a weak position. He was under siege from the right flank of his party. If they're able to find a leader who can unite and they have a unified strategy in a unified way to go into negotiations with President Obama and reach some accommodation that's going to be mutually agreeable, then perhaps this won't be, we won't find ourselves in the same situation. But given everything that we know, given what has been said, what will be said over the next few weeks, the odds of that are fairly minuscule. And right now all eyes are on Paul Ryan. Is Paul Ryan the guy who can bring the House Republicans together? And just things have been said even in recent days by some of the hardliners that say that Paul Ryan is not going to be the answer to the problem here. We have positions and beliefs and things that we want done and handled a certain way, and if he isn't going to do that, then he's not going to get our support. So there are some real questions over whether the dynamics can change at all. Given
the seeming unity across the spectrum in the GOP conference about the desirability of having Paul Ryan, he's got not a little bit of leverage, as to the extent that he has any interest or willingness to do the job, he has leverage at his disposal to say, under these conditions, I'll accept.
Right. I mean, he's getting pulled in a number of different directions. He's being asked to do this because he is basically, in many of his colleagues' eyes, the only choice, the only person who can really perhaps solve these problems. But on the other hand, he has been extremely strategic throughout his whole career about not being put into situations that he doesn't want to be put into. He says that he has his dream job. Chairman of the Ways and Means Committees. He wants to do big things, entitlement reform, tax reform, and he thinks that he's in the best position to do that. And it's unclear whether all of these entreaties from everybody from Mitt Romney to members of his own party in the House to some very significant Republican figures saying you've got to do this for the team is really going to have that sort of effect on him, and that's going to take him off of the course that he thought he was on.
John Boehner is expected to stay in office through the end of October. Beyond that, it's all a huge question mark because of the point you've underscored a couple times. We're in and what you said at the very outset.
Right.
There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty.
When they met week before last as a conference, the last time before leaving Washington for the week, John Boehner said, I will not leave until you have a new speaker. So he has opened the door to staying beyond October 30th, but he doesn't want to be there. Certainly the right wing doesn't want him to be there. So the question is, how does that get resolved?
Talking with Washington Post reporter Mike DeBonis. He covers the Hill very well. We'll take a break. We'll come back with much more right after this.